Hello everyone. So in this session we are going to see about some very important and tricky interview questions on the Java OOPS concept. So go through these questions before you go for test automation or Java developer interviews. So our first question is, can constructor be inherited in the Java? So very important interview question. This will check your knowledge about the inheritance and the constructor concept in the Java. So short answer for this question is no, we cannot inherit constructor in the Java. The subclass for this parent class can call the constructor of the parent class by using the super keyword. So we cannot inherit it, but we can call that constructor of the parent class by using the super keyword in the child class. So this means it doesn't inherit constructor directly. So let's understand with the example. So let's say I have this parent class and I have created one child class from this parent. Now in the parent class I have not added any constructor, same in the child class. So when we compile this program, compiler will add no argument constructor in both the classes. So parent class will have its own no argument constructor. Similarly, child class will also have its own no argument constructor after the compilation. So under this no argument constructor, when compiler add it, it is just going to call the super keyword in the Java. So this super keyword will just call the constructor of the immediate parent of that current class. So under this constructor, super keyword is optional. You don't need to add it explicitly. Compiler will add it when it compiling the program. So in the parent class constructor, we are just printing this parent no argument constructor statement. Same in the child class, we are printing child no argument constructor. So when we run this program by creating the object of the child class with the child reference, first child constructor will be executed, right? So from this child constructor, we know super keyword will be there as a first statement. So as it is a super, it will call the constructor of its immediate parent. Okay, so first the parent constructor will be executed due to the execution of the super keyword, and after that statement from the child constructor will be executed. So first we will get parent no argument constructor, after that we will get child no argument constructor. So in the interviews you can just tell that constructors are linked to the class itself. Every Java class will have its own no argument constructor. So you cannot directly inherit in the child class, but you can call those constructors from the parent class or super class by using the super keyword. That does not inherit that constructor directly. So similar to the same concept, constructor and inheritance, next question is, what happens if parent class has only a parameterized constructor? So now let's say in this parent class I don't have any no argument constructor. I have added one parameterized constructor. So this parameterized constructor in the parent class is accepting one parameter message which is of string type, and we are just printing the value of that message. So in the child class, when we extend this parent class, we cannot directly compile these programs unless we explicitly add our super keyword in the child constructor. Okay, so as a Java rule, your program will not compile unless you explicitly call super keyword inside this no argument constructor. So you have to write super in the bracket. You need to provide some string type of value because parameterized constructor in the parent class is expecting a string type of parameter. So when we run this program, we will get parent constructor and the value of that parameter, whatever we are passing from the child class constructor. And after that, the statement after the super keyword in the child constructor will be executed. So here we will get child no argument constructor. So very important interview question. If parent class do not contain any constructor, compiler can add no argument constructor in both parent and child. But when you add a parameterized constructor in the parent, you need to add super keyword. You need to call this constructor using the super keyword by sending the same type of parameter value from the child class constructor. So next question is related to the access modifiers for the inheritance. Which access modifiers allow inheritance in the Java? So in the Java, inheritance can be used for all the access modifier except the private members. So all the private members of the parent class we cannot inherit at all in the subclasses. Okay, a subclass can only inherit public, protected and default members, and depending upon the package your access will be given. So all the public class data members with the public access modifier, we can access them in the same class, same package, or we can access them in the subclasses in the same package or different packages also. Okay, so you can inherit them and you can access them anywhere in your Java program. So all the protected members we can access in the same class or same package, and in the subclass those can be in your same package or it can be in the different package. All the data members of the parent class with the default modifier, you can access them in the subclass in the same package only. So you need to access this default modifier data members of the parent class in the same package in which parent class exists. You cannot access them outside of this package. And all the private members cannot be inherited in the subclasses. Next question is, does Java supports multiple inheritance? So here I cannot write public class child extends parent1, parent2. Okay, this is not possible in the Java. Every subclass can have only one as a parent class. You cannot have more than one parent. So next following question related to this. If it is not supporting multiple inheritance, what is the multi-level inheritance in the Java? Let's say here I have created one parent class P1. From this P1 I created my child class C1. Okay, by extending this P1. Now again I created subclass of this child class C1. Public class C2 extend C1. Okay, so C2 is the child of C1 and C1 is the child of P1. So all the methods and variables from this P1 are accessible for the C1 directly. But C2 is the child of C1. So C2 also can access the methods and variables of this parent P1. This is called as a multi-level inheritance in the Java. So next question related to the multi-level inheritance. If object class is the parent of all classes, can a user-defined class also extend the object class explicitly along with the another class? So in just previously we have seen that Java doesn't support the multiple inheritance. But in the Java we know object class is the super class for all the user-defined classes or inbuilt classes in the Java. So whenever you create any class in the Java, even though you are not able to see it, but object class will be the super class of the class whatever you have created. Okay, and that is why we will be able to call the methods of this object class by creating the object of our user-defined class. So it is true that object class will be the super class for all the user-defined classes in the Java as long as you do not inherit that class into another class. So P1 have super class as a object class. Then I created C1 class, public class C1. Again this C1 class will have parent as object class. Now I am going to extend C1 from the P1. Public class C1 extend P1. So moment you extend C1 from the P1, the immediate parent for the C1 will be P1, not the object class. So immediate parent of the C1 is P1 and immediate superclass of the P1 is the object class. So this is not a multiple inheritance. This is a multi-level inheritance again. Due to the multi-level inheritance property, we will be able to call the methods of the object class in the C1 as well, even though object class is not a direct parent of the C1. So next question related to the overloading concept. Is changing only the return type enough to overload a method? So for overloading we know method signature has to be different. So your method name should be same but signature should be different, like parameters, their type or their order should be different. So you can use same return type or you can use the different return type as well. So just changing the return type will not be enough for overloading a method. Let's say this calculator class contains this add method public int add integer a comma integer b. So here if I write public double add integer a comma integer b, it is going to give you the error. Okay, only changing the return type will not overload this add method. So in order to overload this add method, I will have to change the number of parameters or their type or their sequence at least. Changing only the return type will not going to overload this add method. Next question related to the overloading again. Can we overload a method in the child class that is already present or defined in the parent class? So when we create child class by using the inheritance concept, all the methods of the parent class are accessible in the child class directly. So you can overload the parent class method in the parent class or in the child class also. You just need to use the same method name and different type of parameters or their order has to be different or different number of parameters. Example, in this parent class I have this m1 method expecting one string parameter. So in order to overload this m1 method, I will have to use different type of parameter or different number of parameters or their order has to be different, right? So I can write public void m1 again in the bracket string s1 comma string s2. Okay, here I have increased the number of parameters. So this I can write in the parent class or same I can write in the child class also. So here we have created child class by extending this parent class. So parent class contains m1 method with one string parameter, and in the child class I have added public void m1 string s1 comma string s2. So this is how we will be able to perform overloading in the child class also. So which method will be executed at the runtime? So depending upon the parameters you are sending while calling the method. So if you are calling this m1 method by sending only one string parameter, m1 from the parent class will be executed. But if you are sending two string parameter while calling the m1 from the child class will be executed. So next question related to the same overloading concept. Can we change the access modifier for overloading method in the child class? Okay, so here we have overloaded this m1 method in the child class. So can we change its access modifier? So answer is yes, we can change the access modifier for this m1 method in the child class, because overloading is resolved at the compile time, right? Overloading is the compile time polymorphism, and overloading is only based on the method's signature, okay, method name and its parameter. So you are allowed to use different access modifier also for overloaded methods even in the child class. So in the parent class we have public void m1, and in the child I can write public void m1 or protected void m1, or I can use the default modifier also, or I can make private also, private void m1. Okay, so all these four combinations are acceptable in case of overloading. So next question, can we overload static methods in Java? So yes, we can overload static methods in the Java just like the other normal methods. So as long as you are using the different method signature, you are able to overload that static methods as well. So whether it is a instance method or static methods, you can overload them in the same class or in the subclass also. For example, in this P1 class, we have added public static void m2 method with some argument. So I can overload this m2 method in the parent class as well as in the child class also. So how I can do it? Public static void m2 in the bracket. Here I will use integer I. So I have changed the type of argument, okay, type of parameter. So this is a overloading. So that I can do in the parent class as well as in the child class as well. So whether that method is a static or non-static, you can overload that method by using different method signature. So another next question related to the overloading of the static methods, very commonly asked in the interviews. Can we overload main method in the Java? So we know main method is also static in the nature. Okay, so main method acts as a entry point for your Java program. And why they have make it static? Because Java will be able to call it without creating any object. That is why main method is a static. So yes, you can overload main method in the Java, but only the method with the standard signature public static void main string array args. This will be used by the JVM to start your Java program. For example, in this class I have added public static void main string array args, okay, and below that again I have added public static void main string args. So instead of string array, I am using only one string parameter. So this is the overloaded version of the main method with one string parameter. Again I can write public static void main in the bracket integer a. So this is the another version of the overloaded main method. Okay, so for the execution, all these other versions of this main method will not be used or will not be executed unless you call them manually inside any real main method. So now let's see few questions related to the overriding. So first question is, can we override private methods in the Java? So no, we cannot override private methods in the Java, because all these private methods are not inherited in the child class, that we already seen. Private methods or private members cannot be inherited in the subclasses, because this private modifier scope is only within the same class. You cannot access outside of the class. So all those will not be visible to the subclass, and that's why we cannot perform overriding for that private methods. So let's say in the parent class we have private void method 1, okay, in the parent, and in the child class also I have added private void method 1. So this is not a overriding. It is a new method for this child class. So private methods belong to only the class wherever they have defined. So even if you created a subclass which is going to define the same method with same name, same signature, it is not a overriding. It is just a new method for that child class. Next question is, can we override final or static methods in the Java? So it can be another common follow-up question for this overriding concept. So we cannot override private methods as well as we cannot override final and static methods in the Java. So when you create a method as final in the Java, that method will be linked or locked to the parent class only. Okay, so compiler will prevent overriding it in the subclasses. So if subclass defines a static methods with the same name, with the same signature, that is called as a method hiding, not the overriding. For example, let's say in the parent class we added this m1 method, okay, which is a non-static for now. In order to override this m1 method in the child class, I will have to use the same method signature. So for this combination parent reference and the child object, JVM is going to check first whether m1 is overridden in the child class or not. So currently this m1 is non-static in nature. So it is going to execute m1 from the child class as per the overriding concept. Now I am going to change this m1 method to static now. Okay, from non-static to static. So public static m1 in the parent class, and in the child also public static m1. So this static method will be linked to class now. You don't need to create the object to call this m1 static method. So previously with this combination parent reference and the child object, for the non-static m1 method, it was executing the m1 from the child class. But the moment you make it static with the same object reference, when you call the m1, now m1 from the parent class will be executed. Okay, and that is why it is hiding the method m1 implementation in the child class, and that is why it is called as a method hiding. Okay, so when you re-implement or redefine the static methods in the child class, that is called as a method hiding, not the overriding. So for method overriding, you need to use the same method signature, and that method has to be non-static. If it is a static method, you can directly call it by using the parent reference. Okay, parent class name dot that method name. So for calling this m1 from the parent, I can directly use parent dot m1. It will execute the static m1 method from the parent class. And if I want to execute the m1 from the child, I will have to call it by using the child class name. So child dot m1. So this will execute static m1 method from the child class. So next question is, can we change the access modifier for an overridden method in the child class? So for the overridden method in the child class, you can always increase the visibility of that overridden method, but you cannot reduce the visibility, or you cannot reduce the scope of that method in the child class. For example, here in the parent class, I have used public access modifier for this m1 method. So in the child class, I can use public only. I cannot use protected, default and private. Okay, I cannot reduce the scope of this m1 in the child class. Let's say in the parent, m1 now have protected modifier. So for this m1 in the child class, either I can use protected or I can use the public. Okay, so as per the Java rule for the access modifier for the overriding concept, I can increase the visibility. So m1 in the parent have protected. So I can make it protected or public to increase the visibility. If it is a default in the parent class, then I can use default, protected and public in the child class. Okay, so you need to make sure you are doing it in the same package only. So method with the default modifier in the parent class, we can use default, protected and public. And for the private, we have already seen we cannot override or we cannot perform inheritance also for the methods with the private modifiers in the parent class. So let's say in the parent, I have public m1 method, and when I try to use it protected or default or private, I will get the compilation error. Okay, so public m1, you need to use public only. If it is protected, you can go with the protected or public. If it is a default m1 in the parent, then either you can use default, protected or public. Okay, so you are allowed to change the access modifier in the child class. Only thing is, you cannot reduce the visibility or scope of that overridden method in the child class. You can always increase the scope. So next intro question, can the return type be different for overridden method in the child class? Okay, can we use the different return type for the methods in the parent class in the child class? Or another sub question can be, what is covariant return type in the Java where it is applicable? So in method overriding, the return type must be same as that parent method's return type, or it can be the subclass. Okay, it can be the child class of the return type of that parent class method. So this concept is called as a covariant return type. Let's see this simple example. Let's say class parent contains this public object m1 method. So return type of this m1 method is a object class. So in the child class, I can override this m1 method by using object as a return type, or I can use any subclass of this object class. Okay, so we know object class is the super class for all the user defined or inbuilt classes in the Java. Here I am going to use any subclass. For example, I am using string class. So public string m1 in the child class. So string class is the subclass of the object class. Okay, so I can use string, that is allowed. So any subclass of this object class you can use as a return type for this m1 method in the child class. This concept is called as a covariant return type. Let's say another example. Here we created one parent p1. In the p1 we created m1 method which has return type as a parent p1. Then in the child class, for this m1, either I can use p1 which is the same return type as that of parent, or I can use the c1 also. So c1 is the subclass of this p1, right? So you can use p1 or c1 as a return type for this m1 method in the child class. And this is possible, or this is allowed in the Java due to the covariant return types.